Hi everyone, this is Allison from Allykatkreations. How are you? I'm hanging in. Before I begin, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. I am going to crank out as many videos as possible due to my financial circumstances. This is probably my last month having any sort of internet, electric, gas, and others, and I'm sure soon the bank will come after my already paid off house because they can't pay the property tax. So yeah, I'm not here to diminish anybody or pity party myself, but I gotta pay the bills in order to do these. So without further ado, Manly P. Hall. I already did the first part. And this is The Occult Anatomy of Man. I'm reading off a PDF, so please don't mind me. And again, for all of you who follow, this is one of the books that my favorite Jason wanted people to read. So all of the books that I try to read, not all, but the majority of them are from a recommendation. So shout out to Jason. I hope he watches, but if not, that's okay. This is for all his followers. And those of you who just want to enlighten yourself to different things and different perspectives, again, this book is a different perspective. It's opening up our minds to things that you might not have heard before. And what better place than from me, who's different and the world sees me as different. We're going to start with part 4, the infernal worlds. At the base of the spine is located the throne of the Lord of Form, commonly called Jehovah and Shiva. The linga is his symbol. He rides the great bull of earthliness. His daughter is death and destruction, yet he is not a thing of evil. He builds the bodies which give us the power to function in the lower worlds. He crystallizes them around lines of force. Geometry is the skeleton, and all the bodies which he builds are geometric problems, geometric angles, crystallized into rocks and stones. Gradually, the crystallization which brings bodies into the world causes them to become too dense and unyielding to respond to the stable impressions from the spiritual consciousness. Slowly they turn to stone, and death is the result of the same cause that brought the body into the world. The early races of the earth worshipped the procreative attributes of life. They felt that the highest expression of life was the power of giving still another life to the world. Therefore, the principle of life-giving was personified into a deity who gave life to all things, or rather brought into manifestation the latent life, which cannot grow or unfold in the physical world without the vehicle of dense substance. Per machine, my co-host Morgan says hi to everybody. As she purrs, I hope you can hear it. It's cute. Got her to move. To the occultist, birth is Delhi and death is awakening. The mystics of ancient days taught that to be born into the physical world was to enter a tomb, for no other plane of nature is so unresponsive, so limited as the earth world. Time and distance were prison bars, chaining the soul to narrow environments. Heat and cold tormented the soul. Age deprived it of its faculties, and man's life was but a preparation for death. As life is lived under the shadow of death, they taught that it is a mockery, a hollow thing, gilded to the careless eyes, but tarnished and worm-eaten upon close examination. The physical body become the sepulchre, tire tomb, the place of burial, in which spirit lay awaiting the day of liberation, when as a virgin spark it should arise again from the bottom urn of clay. Their lore in all the religions of the world, we have the lower world as a black pit into which Yama, the lord of the underworld, hurls the souls of the damned to suffer in a hell of their own creation. For it is true that each race makes from its own nature the demons which torment it. Here, Typhon, the Egyptian god of destruction, with the body of a hog and the head of a crocodile, awaits with yawning jaws to devour those who have failed to make proper use of life's opportunities. Amongst most peoples, the demon is symbolized as part animal, part human. He dwells in the animal nature of man, and those who are controlled by their appetites, their likes and dislikes, their hates and fears, need no further damnation. They have built their own hell and are experiencing its torments. The generative system is gradually being absorbed into the brain, and the man of the next great world period will generate its progenies, or at least form vehicles for them, through the larynx, which is the organ of the spoken word. We are told that a small etheric body, which will later be the organ of positive reproduction, is gradually being built near the larynx. Ultimately, human beings will become capable of raising the spinal fire through the Sushumna canal. This is the evolutionary process, however, covering a long period of time. The physical body is supposed to be under the control of the moon, which rules the liquids of the earth. The moon was the last incarnation of the earth spirit, and the human race passed through its states of animal consciousness in the etheric body of the moon lord. The lunar spirits are called the ancestors and are known to Christians as angels. These beings have control of the generative powers of animal and man. The life coming into incarnation often chooses its future vehicle many years before it appears in the world. It is said that the etheric germ is placed in the body of the parent A, long as 20 years before the child comes into the world. This is the result of its search for an environment especially suited to its spiritual and material needs. There's so much commentary that I want to give right now about that last statement because it applies to me. Go see my adoption story, guys, about how my adoptive parents and the time frame from them to my biological parents and then my becoming. Just saying. Certain occult schools have taught that the spiritual consciousness of man was not fixed in any point of the body, but was in whatever part of man his thoughts dwelt. We know that there are 3 worlds where man may dwell. The first is his mental world, where he may live surrounded by his thoughts, his dreams, and his aspirations. The second is his human world, where he may be one of the great middle class, which thinks alike, eats alike, sleeps alike, and worries unceasingly. The third possible home is his animal world, where he may dwell in the midst of passions, lusts, and hates, which burn his soul and consumes his body. The history of primitive races show that they have risen through all of these stages until the last few have become truly thinking creatures. The blood of every man is individual. When crystallizing, it forms into geometric patterns which differ with every person, so that by means of blood analysis, a far surer system could be evolved for crime detection than either the Bertillon or fingerprint systems. The story of man's soul is written in his blood. The position he occupies in evolution, his hopes and his fears, are all imprinted on the etheric forms which flow through its bloodstream. Until red blood came into the body, the spirit of man could not enter, but hovered over the body attached to it by an electric thread. By studying crickets, grasshoppers, and similar small creatures clairvoyantly, it is possible to observe impulses from the little globes hovering over their bodies, which result in the primitive motion and sense which they demonstrate. Therefore, it is said that the actual line between the vegetable and the animal is drawn with the coming of red blood. Consequently, certain small fishes, mollusks, are technically vegetables, although not recognized as such by science. The liver is the key to the red blood. Lucifer's red garments derive their color from the blood, while the word Lucifer means a carrier of light or heat and is named for the blood. For this reason, he is the spirit of temptation. In the Christian mysteries, the piercing of the liver of Christ by the spear of the centurion is especially mystical, while Prometheus, the friend of man, hanging upon the peak of Mount Cassius, with a vulture gnawing at his liver, is the same myth expressed in the symbolism of ancient Greece. It is further interesting to note the relation between the words live and liver, for to have a liver is to live. Along the same line, we may note that the word live spelled backwards becomes evil, and the word lived becomes devil. This particular relationship is found not only in English, but to a slightly less noticeable degree in several languages. When we take up this, however, we become involved in the study of Kabbalism, which is the analysis of the symbolic meaning of words. Red is the color of blood and the key of the liver, and its effect upon animals, I'm sorry guys, that was a misprint, is noticeable. It irritates, excites, and in some cases actually causes animals to go mad. Therefore, it is often used in making the capes worn during bullfights. These, the fighters, flaunt in the bull's face, and trouble usually follows. The use of red lights is not uncommon in black magic. Evil magicians use them to materialize specters, while medical science has already discovered that red light is a strong irritant when applied to the human body. During anger and heat, the astral aura of man becomes streaked with red flames, very closely resembling thunderbolts. Very often, the base of the spine glows with a murky red, symbolic of hate, passion, or anger. This red glow, burning eternally at the base of the spine, has given rise to the story of the hellfire and damnation, but the preacher has failed to remind the laity that they carry their own hell around with them wherever they go. The red power is said to be broken from the white light of the sun through the body of Samael, the spirit of Mars. This is the cause of the red glow in the heavens. Mars is the god of war, wrangling, hate, and dissension. He was the patron deity of the Roman Empire, whose uniformed soldiers wore red as a symbol of his sway. Following the lead of this patron saint, they conquered the world, Ami, then fell upon the sword with which they had murdered others. While red is the color of the body, yellow is regarded as the color of the soul. For the reason the Buddhas and world saviors are usually symbolized as being surrounded with a golden nimbus or halo. This light is the yellow robe, also the light bearing witness to the darkness, of which St. John wrote. This light flooding through the third ventricle represents the Shinkta of the Jews, which hovers over the mercy seat as the pact between God and man. Yellow is a vitalizer, a life giver. Therefore, the golden hair sun and its personification, the Christ, are both givers of life. Devitalization may be successfully treated by exposing the spleen to sunlight. Blue, the highest of the three primary colors, is the color given to the Father. It is a relaxing, restful color, especially valuable in the treatment of insanity and obsession. It is difficult for Black magicians to function successfully in a blue light. Its affinity to the mind is very evident, and it gathers as an electric sea in the pineal gland, as the extract from all the spiritual qualities of human nature. The blue heart to every flame was said to symbolize the invisible Father behind the glowing sun. In the words of Christ, quote, "He that hath seen me hath seen the Father. I am in the Father and the Father in me," end quote. The use of colors in symbolism is very interesting. The green dragon, whom the heroes of mythology usually slay, represents the earth. The white armor is a purified physical body. The Black magician is darkness and uncertainty. All the colors have symbolic value, and great lessons can be learned from the study of the application of these values to occultism. While discussing the subject of occult anatomy and physiology, we must stop for a moment to give credit to the alchemists and Rosicrucians who, during the Middle Ages, concealed the study of occult anatomy by dressing up the organs of the human body in the form of retorts and alchemical vessels. One of their great exponents said in substance, quote, "Our chemistry is not with chemicals as you know them, but the certain secret vessels," end quote, internal organs, and spiritual chemicals which are visible to the ordinary individual. We do not believe in torturing chemicals, end quote, combining them to form gases, vapors, or seething masses. Quote, "For chemicals like men can suffer when brought into unkind relationship with each other," end quote. The alchemical furnace was the human body. The fire that burned in it was at the base of the spine. The chimney, which the spinal cord up which the vapors passed to be gathered again and distilled in the brain. This was indeed a secret system brought to Europe from the Far East, where for centuries it has been considered the highest form of religion. We may call the occult truths the principles of operative spirituality in contradiction to modern religion, which it is made entirely of speculative theories. People do not dream that religion is physiological, nor would they believe that their salvation depend entirely on scientific uses of their life elements and forces within their own bodies. But in spite of all that may be said to the contrary, such is the case. During the next few years, much will be dense to enlighten men concerning the secret workings of his own parts and members. It is very interesting to note the similitude existing between the incarnations or appearances in the world of the great avatar, Vishnu, and the changes which take place in the human embryo previous to birth. This brings us to our next topic, occult embryology. Very interesting. Occult embryology, part 5. The great Lord Vishnu has already come 9 times into the world to save his people. His 10th birth is yet to come. His 9 appearances closely parallel the 9 principal changes taking place in the human embryo previous to birth. Vishnu was first born out of the mouth of a fish. He then rose out of the body of a turtle. Still later, he appeared as a boar, then a lion, afterwards a monkey. And after a number of still other changes, he appeared as a man. I note some time ago that a scientist had arranged a table showing the relationship of the human brains of various animals during their prenatal period. He followed exactly the list of incarnations of Vishnu, while totally unaware that he was linking together Oriental occultism and occult dental embryology. The cosmogony myths of nearly every nation was based upon embryology. The formation of the cosmos is said to have taken place in the same way that man formed, only on a larger scale. For example, the Vishnu Puranas were told that creation took place within the womb of men. Space was surrounded by great mountains and cliffs, the Korayan. The universe was created out of water and floated into a great sea, the amniotic fluid. Down a ladder, the umbilical cord, came the gods. 4 rivers flowed into the new land, as told in Genesis. These are the blood vessels of the umbilical cord. So the story goes, and a marvelous correlation exists. Someday, perhaps, a new science may be based upon the law of an analogy. This will prove to be a far greater contribution to scientific data than all the scientific speculations of all ages. It is reasonably certain that the story of Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden is based upon embryology, and that the womb is the original Garden of Eden. In symbolism, it is represented by a dot in a circle. This dot is a primitive germ, and so on as far as you wish to carry the analogy. The egg of Brahma is a story of cosmic embryo, and embryology is the basic study of creation. In embryology, we also have a very interesting recapitulation of the passage of the human race through the various species of nature. Here we find at certain periods the Hyperborean creatures. At another time, we see the primitive Lemurian man, later the Atlantean, and finally the Aryan. We most certainly recommend to all occult students that they make a very careful study of this subject. Science knows that all life upon this planet came out of the water. The human embryo is enveloped in water through all primitive stages of its growth. And in it, we find the story of the evolution of things. Sex did not appear upon the planet until the 3rd race. It does not appear in the embryo until the 3rd month. The recapitulation of human embryo through the lower kingdoms of nature is one of the strongest proofs of evolution, inasmuch as it proves conclusively that man could not have been made originally in his adult condition. Consequently, he passed through a cosmic embryology. In fact, he is still in the embryo and will not actually be born into the human race until he is truly human, which will not be for many thousands of years. He is just in the state of becoming man. The 9 months of the prenatal epoch have been employed in the symbolism for ages. 9 is called the number of man because of the 9 months that the body is in a state of preparation. The perfect number is supposed to be 12. So at the present time, man is born 3 months before he is finished. The gradual unfoldment of the human race will result in more being accomplished during the prenatal epoch, until finally birth will be the ultimate, and all experience and growth will take place in the embryonic state. Man is not born all at once. He may say that he is born by degrees. The consciousness works outside of the body, laboring with the plastic substances up to the time of the quickening, when it takes hold of the vehicle from within and begins to mold a certain amount of individuality out of the materials which surround it. At the time of birth, the physical body is born, and a process of crystallization sets in, which never ceases for a moment until death. Man begins to die the moment he is born, and the span of life is the length of time which this requires. At the 7th year, the vital body comes into action, and great periods of growth commence. It is then that parents begin to experience difficulties. It is the time of letting close down and out. Children shoot up like weeds, for they are literally recapitulating their plant existence, whereas before that time they were recapitulating their mineral state. At about the 7th year, the child begins to manufacture vital essences within his own body. Up to that time, he lives upon life forces secreted in the ductless glands of the throat before birth. In other words, he maintains himself upon life, which he has stored away from the parent. At about 7, he starts work for himself. He is on the go every minute, and in youth could only bottle up its energy and preserve it for old age. What a wonderful world we would live in. Between 12 and 14 in the temperate zones, the liver starts activity. The emotional body is born. It is during these adolescent years the youth faces its great problem. Emotionalism runs riot. The consciousness is recapitulating its animal existences. It may truly be said that these are the days of puppy love. These are years often filled with great mistakes. More lives are blighted between the 14th and 21st years than any other period of life. It has been observed that the children of strongly emotional races are often brilliant at the head of their classes until adolescence. When, however, the emotional nature becomes active at about the 14th year, these children frequently lose interest and ability in formal education. Any school teacher who has taught foreign children will vouch for this condition among certain nationalities. The moron is an example of the loss of mental function with the birth of the astral body, and there are many of these examples. During these years of emotional riot, parents must rule their kids with a firmness and kindness, or those same children will turn someday upon their parents and blame them for ruining their lives. Between 18 and 21, according to the climatic conditions, the mental body takes hold, and we say that the individual has reached the age of majority. He is then permitted to vote. His father presents him with a gold watch and sends him out into the world to seek his fortune. Not one person in a million realizes why 21 is set at the age of majority, but every occultist knows the reason. The spiritual consciousness, the true I am, does not take hold of its new body until the 21st year. Up to that time, it is ruled entirely by the lower sense centers. Life thus progresses in cycles of 7 years. As an example of this, we know that the 28th year is the period of second cycle birth. The 35th year, the period of second vital birth, or as it is called, second growth. The 42nd year, the period of second emotional birth. During these years, people otherwise perfectly normal very often grow sentimentally. The 49th year marks the dawn of a new period of mental activity. The following 7 years are the golden years of thought. They are the periods of philosophic reason, the crowning years of life, and so cycle after cycle. If the individual waits long enough, he may pass through his second, third, and fourth childhoods. Few people realize that they are composed of mineral, plant, and animal elements. The bones are literally minerals. Hair is a plant nourished by waves of vital ether pouring out through the skin. while within every individual are thousands of little wiggling, creeping, crawling things that make each of us zoo all by ourselves. The ancient Scandinavians realized this, wrote many legends about the little creatures that live in man. A famous statue of Father Nile shows him covered over with tiny human figures representing the attributes and functions of man. Man is a great study, but we make very little use of our textbook. The scriptures of all nations are filled with anatomical references to cities and places that have no existence outside of man himself. The 12 gates of the holy city are the 12 apertures in the human body. Like the 12 masters of wisdom and the 12 great schools of philosophy, these apertures are divided into 2 divisions of 7 and 5. There are 7 visible openings and 5 concealed openings in the human body. One Greek philosopher told his disciples to remember distinctly that there were 6 openings leading to the human brain, but only 1 leading out of the human head, and that one led from the stomach. Therefore, they were to listen twice, once with each ear, look twice, each with each eye, sense twice, one with each nostril, but to speak only once. And that what they spoke would come from the stomach and the brain. The advice still holds good. The Hebrews used the human head as a favorite symbol to express the divine attributes, calling it the great face. The 2 eyes were correlated to the Father, for there were organs of consciousness. The 2 nostrils to the Son, because they were organs of sense, and also vehicles for prana, the life force in the ether. The mouth was used to symbolize the Holy Spirit, the one who sent forth the spoken word and formed the world. The 7 vowels to which the mouth gave birth were the 7 spirits before the throne. Also the vials of trumpets of revelation. They went forth as the army of Tyre voice to create in the 7 worlds, and all nature resulted from their creative power. Few realize the magnificent symbolism concealed within the human head and how it has been used in scriptural writings. To this article is appended a treatise which was published separately some years ago, but has been out of print for some time. The treatise has a direct bearing upon the subject of anatomical symbolism, showing how the principles outlined in the preceding pages work out when applied to different world problems of today. Very interesting stuff. Occult Masonry, and this is the last part and portion of this. To the student of mystic Masonry, one problem eternally presents itself. He knows it under many names. It is told to him in many symbols, but briefly it may be defined as the purification and liberation of spirit and body from the bane of crystallization and materiality. In other words, he is seeking to rescue the life buried amidst the ruins of his fallen temple and restore it to its rightful place as the keystone of his spiritual arc. When studying ancient Masonry, we are dealing with one of the first revelations of what we know as the wisdom teachings. Like other great mysteries, it consists of solutions to problems of everyday existence. It may seem of little use to us now to study these ancient abstract symbols, but in time, every student will realize that the things he now casts aside as worthless are the jewels which one day he will need. Like the centaur in the zodiac, man is eternally striving to lift his human consciousness from the body of the animal, and in the 3-rung ladder of Masonry, we find the 3 great steps which are necessary for this liberation. These 3 steps are the 3 grand divisions of human consciousness. We can briefly define them as materiality, intellectuality, and spirituality. They also represent action on the lower rung, emotion on the central, and mentality of the highest. All human beings are lifting themselves up to God by climbing these three steps that lead to liberation. When we have unified these three manifestations into harmonious balance, we then have the flaming triangle. The ancients declared God as the dot in the circle to be unknowable, but said that he manifested through these three witnesses, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Now the same is true with man. The part of God which is within each of us can manifest only through his three witnesses. The Father manifests through our thoughts, the Son through our emotions, and the I, Holy Spirit, through our actions. When we balance thoughts, our desires, and our actions, we have equilateral triangle. When man's purified life energies radiate through these three witnesses, we have a halo of flame added to the triangle, in the center of which is God, the unknowable and unthinkable one, the Yod, or flaming letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the abyss, which no one can understand, but from which all things come. The life of this unknown pours outward through the triangle, which in the higher degree is surrounded by a halo of flame. The halo is the soul built from the transmuted thought, action, and desire, the eternal triangle of God. Among Masonic symbols is the beehive, called the symbol of industry, for it clearly demonstrates how man should cooperate with his fellow men for the mutual development of all. It also contains a much deeper message, for each living soul is a bee that travels through life and gathers the pollen of wisdom from the environments and experiences of life. As the bee gathers the honey from the heart of the flower, so each of us should extract the spiritual nectar from each happening, each joy and each sorrow, and incorporate it into the great beehive of experience, the soul body of man. In the same way, it is said that the spiritual energies in man eternally take the life force he is transmuting and carry them up into the beehive in the brain, where he is kept the honey or oil necessary for the substance of life. Very interesting.